You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast produced by Veteran Strategies and featuring conversations with fascinating and impactful men and women who have shaped our world, our communities, and our history. My name is Robert Vane, Principal of Veteran Strategies, and your host for our discussion. You are listening to Leaders and Legends, a podcast presented by Veteran Strategies, an Indiana-based public relations enterprise, and sponsored by Garmon Construction, Leaders and Legends LLC, the Grand Hall and Conference Center at Historic Union Station, the McGinley's Golden Ace Inn, and NFP, a national insurance broker with strong local content. Our podcast is featured on the All Indiana Podcast Network in partnership with Wish TV. You may find Leaders and Legends at allindianapodcastnetwork.com. Thinking of starting a podcast or need to host a public meeting? Let Leaders and Legends LLC be your partner as you look for new ways to communicate your message. Please contact Chris Spangle or me at leadersandlegends.net. And as always, all our podcast interviews are dedicated to the legacy and generosity of P.E. McAllister. On the night of Friday, November 17th, 1978, 4 young employees went missing from the Burger Chef in Speedway, Indiana. It has become a legendary case for many reasons, including it's an unsolved case. It's received several treatments, is known as the Burger Chef Murders, but has never received the treatment, the brilliant, in-depth, heartfelt treatment and investigation it's received in the new documentary, The Speedway Murders. It was directed and written by Rynderman and Adam Kamien. They are, as you're about to hear, not from Speedway, Indiana, but the meticulous nature of their investigation and presentation is nothing short of brilliant. The Burger Chef Murders are just one of several crimes during the time period, and in many ways, they are interwoven. On this week's Leaders and Legends podcast, we talked to Luke and Adam about not only the crimes themselves, their theories, but also how they put together. And when you watch the documentary, you will be astonished how they put together the detail of Burger Chef in the late 1970s. Luke and Adam, thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's astonishing. It's an achievement. I am very much in your debt for learning more about something that was a part of my childhood, even though I grew up in Irvington, the Irvington part of Indianapolis on the east side, not the Speedway part, the west part of Marion County. Let's get right into it. The main question we'll start and then we'll move on from it is, and I know you're going to get asked this all the time, so I might as well join the crowd. There are untold number of unsolved murders around the globe. But from Australia, you have focused on Speedway, Indianapolis, Indiana, or Marion County.
Yeah, you're right. It's a question we get a lot. We came across a forum online and went down the rabbit hole, and the case really kind of got its hooks in us, and we thought, oh, let's do a bit of a deeper dive. So we started to ring around, and we're really lucky to be able to speak with some of the families of the victims, some law enforcement, and even some people who had been implicated in the murders. And the further we went, the stranger it got, and we just tumbled down the rabbit hole and never really came out, and here we are 6 years later.
Luke?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but we getting over there and meeting the people that were directly involved that this has affected, such as Teresa, Ruth's sister. You see how real and how raw it still is with them, and we just couldn't back away from it, and it just became part of our lives. And yeah, once we were over there, we just had to keep going and make it into what we did.
I'm going to do the best I can to use Ms. Teresa Jeffries. That's Sister Ruth. I'm going to try to remember to use her admonition and not call the four workers victims. They were Jayne Freet, Daniel Davis, Mark Flemons, and Ruth Ellen Shelton. And they will never be forgotten. Not here, not ever. Let's set the scene. It's November 17th, 1978. What's the weather, time? What's happening in this era of Speedway, Indiana, that made the burger chefs a target?
Yeah, it's fall, it's a cold night. Speedway at the time, for whatever reason, there was a lot of crime in the area, a lot of sort of bike gangs, drug crime, violent crime. Excuse me. And in fact, there are a lot of crimes that sort of orbit the Speedway murders, including the Speedway bombings, where a series of bombs were set off around town in the lead up to the Burger Chef murders. There was the body in the barrel case of Mary Ann Higginbotham, whose body washed up inside a barrel. She'd been shot in the head, and that was in White Lick Creek. And one of the things we run into a lot when we look at this case is all of the different kind of shop rackets, drug operations, and violent crime that was happening in the area.
It really was almost the center of the news cycle. And I wrote all this down. So the crime took place in November 17th, 78. The bodies were found November 19th, 1978. November 18th, 1978, you had the mass suicide at the People's Temple in Guyana, which was led by Hoosier.
Jim Jones,
Jim Jones, who was born in Crete, Indiana, started his church, I think, right here in Indianapolis. But prior to that, February 8th, 1977, in Indianapolis, you had the Tony Kuritzis kidnapping of Richard Hall.
Yeah, that's wild, that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Richard Hall came on this podcast right before he passed. It was a terrific interview. He really laid it out, everything that happened. I can send it to you if you like, but he was I'd love to hear. Yeah. He's very forthcoming. Then on December 1st, 1977, you had the crash of the helicopter carrying Paul Page, who became a very famous racing commentator, sports figure, who also has been on the Leaders and Legends podcast. And then from September 1st to September 6th, 1978, you had 8 bombings. Is this level of violence in your research relatively normal or unnormal in a particularly small geographic area? Was that compelling to you?
It's incredibly compelling. In some ways, it made it very difficult to investigate this case because there are so many bad actors, and it's impossible to rule them all out. So we would hear from people constantly that would tell us about somebody or some organization or some person who had done something terrible, and that we should look at that person. There were also a very strange kind of number of confessions. It became at one point almost in vogue to confess to the Burger Chef murders, which I think says something about the area at the time, that people would talk about it as a badge of honor and a don't mess with me kind of message to others. Yeah. I think that says something about the place at that time.
You know who you've actually left off and who's actually come up lately is Stephen Judy.
Who killed the mother and the 3 kids.
Yeah, I've had 2 phone calls just after the trailer was released with people saying that they thought he was involved with it, that he lived in the area, he knew Johnson County really well, and that the MO was similar and stuff like that. But yeah.
I'm going to get this maybe right, but in the 70s, it was Steve and Judy, and I forget the name of the victim, and I think she had 3 kids. Their car broke down. He stopped to help.
It was near Whiteley Creek as well, I think.
Yeah. He raped her, then threw the kids in the creek and then killed her. And then Stephen Judy was eventually executed. Yeah. It's interesting. I'm against the death penalty, even though I think people deserve it.
He wanted it as well.
Yeah, he certainly deserved it. But is that a part of the scene of the 70s? You wanted to be regarded as a tough guy. They're making a lot of money. You mentioned Brett Kimberlin in the documentary making all this money from drugs. It was just a way to receive what you would call juice or respect. Have people step off when you walked. Is that a fair analysis?
I think so. That's definitely what we heard. We literally spoke to, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of people. And a lot of the leads didn't go anywhere, but a lot of them were to the effect, I was at a barbecue and my uncle, who's a convicted robber, said to his nephew, if you don't behave, I'll kill you like I killed those kids at the Burger Chef.
But one of the people that we talk about in the film apparently had the nickname Burger Chef Jeff.
Oh, who was an actual character in their marketing, Burger Chef Jeff. Burger Chef and Jeff. Yeah, that's right. Is there any indication, to move on just real quick, from Steve and Judy, that did he ever say, look, I'm dying anyway, I might as well let you know?
No, he never. And he confessed to the others. He was very vocal about there's interviews where you see him talk about it, but no, and I think that they did press him for the Burger Chef 4.
But there are law enforcement officers in a certain county, which we won't name here, who are adamant that it was Judy.
Really? Adamant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the phone call that I got, the phone call that I got recently was from a former detective.
Yeah, and I spoke to him
not a lot of evidence.
a couple of years ago. Yeah, no, they're adamant. I never was presented with any other evidence than he's a dead ringer for the sketch of the clean-shaven man, and he is, for whatever that's worth. Jim Cramer is one who says those sketches did more harm than good because they basically looked like every guy with a beard and every guy without a beard from the 70s. So
basically everyone in the 70s.
Yes.
Yeah.
For those who watch the documentary, I don't know why, the creepiest part of the documentary are those freaking clay models.
Yeah. The clay busts are
clay busts.
Yeah.
They look like something right out of Helter Skelter.
Yeah. They were done by the art school niece of one of the detectives, I believe.
Yeah.
I'll leave that for the people who get to see it. And then I want to make sure that we get to this because you have 4 theories. There's the robber gang theory, the Forrester conundrum, the Speedway bomber, and the eyewitness account. Have I gotten those correct?
Yeah.
And then we'll end with the 40-year-old secret. Everything I've read about the investigation, and of course it's a rabbit hole and that doesn't even do it justice, is the initial investigation by the Speedway police. On a scale of A to F, how would you grade it?
I would say, listen, there was some excellent police work done. Unfortunately, in the early days, there was a lot of terrible police work done. We talk about it in the documentary. From the get-go, it was botched. When police turn up around midnight on the 17th and the kids are missing, purses still in the restaurant. The kids have probably just taken the money and gone out to buy a beer. Nothing to see here, and the restaurant's open the next day. So whatever evidence was there that might have been collected they came in the morning, mopped the floors, cleaned the countertops, everything was... They later restaged the crime scene in an attempt to get it back to what it was so they could have crime scene photos. But there was also things that went wrong at the murder scene itself. There were things that were taken from the scene there as well, and other things. That I think it's important to point out, though, that Jim Kramer, who had the case for the best part of 25 years, I think off the top of my head, is an incredible lawman, dedicated to the families. And you can see in the film just how much this haunts him. But unfortunately, I think given what happened really early on, he was up against it.
And to be fair, and I want Luke to weigh in, Speedway Police have collectively admitted that the initial investigation was horribly botched. So we're not picking on them per se.
Yeah. Yeah. Kramer talks about it as well, pretty frankly, that what they were given was a bit of they had to work with what they got, what they'd been given. And unfortunately, the early stages of it, I think they wanted it. They were hoping that it was the kids running off with the takings and then a kidnapping, which would have been easier. And then when the horrible events turned up in Johnson County, they found the bodies. It was too late.
And you said things were taken from the crime scene. What was taken from the crime scene itself, the woods in Johnson County?
I'm trying to remember.
There was tire tracks that weren't collected properly. I know that. They found tire tracks there. And I don't think that they really did their work with getting molds and stuff. And
Luke, correct me if I'm wrong. Was there a cigarette butt or a shell casing or something that was taken from the scene by one of the officers who was later fired?
I don't know about that.
Yeah,
I
can't.
I think I know that they have evidence in sealed and the uniforms, and there are cigarette butts as well as shell casings. But with the DNA testing, I know they've talked about that they can only do it a certain amount of times, and they're waiting for for technology to catch up, so that they don't want to do it before they can really have the right technology.
You mentioned before about, and it's in the documentary, and we're discussing the Speedway Murders, a brand new documentary on the Burger Chef killings from 1978, that there was a string of robberies. And one of the central questions that you pose is, why robbery to murder? Did you come to any conclusions about the most accurate answer to that question?
I can't tell you how many hours Luke and I have spent on the phone theorizing, why did it escalate? It's the burning question. Why, if it was a robbery, what happens to take it from a robbery to a mass murder? The idea that gets put forward, or the theory that gets put forward, is that Jayne, who was the manager of the restaurant, recognized one of the members of the robber gang because she worked at a Burger Chef near where that individual worked, and that he would have gone in there and they probably would have recognized him. So the theory is they burst in, she recognizes him, and then they have to take them into the woods and murder them all. Interestingly, I have a relationship with one of the members of the robber gang who's not implicated in this, was looked at, but was cleared, but was active with that gang. And he says that intermittently they would put stockings over their face, and sometimes they wouldn't do that. And then even if that's true, even if they did go in there with no face coverings and were immediately recognized, is that a reason to put 4 kids in a van, take them out to the woods and execute them? It's a bit of a stretch for me. But
yeah, you know what I think as well is the biggest kind of, for us, the red flag was like that they'd park their car, because their whole MO was that they'd park their car about 5 minutes away, go on foot, and then take an employee's car or whatever, or just leave on foot. And where they parked on West 15th Street, it's a 20-minute walk. Like Adam measured it, we've walked it, we really wanted to test the theory. And it's just such a far away place to park a getaway vehicle.
And it's cold, as you mentioned, and we're
Right near a
discussing.
police station.
Then it's
Very
right near a police station. That's
like
right.
almost opposite. Yeah.
Uh, we're discussing the robber gang theory. There are 4 theories that come through in the documentary. But
it's important to note as well that the robber gang, save for one incident, which our understanding was an accident, there was no, the robber gang were never really violent, for whatever that's worth.
And you have someone, and I don't know if it's Jim Kramer, who is he Indiana State Police?
That's retired. But yeah.
And he is affected by it. Matter of fact, at one point starts to break and asks for a slight pause. There are some who think the robber gang theory, I think it's one guy who says it's 99%. He believes that's the correct theory. Why would you, people who have investigated it, agree or disagree about the robber gang theory?
Look, ultimately, we've done the research. We've spoken to as many people as we can. We've put this document together and people will make up their own minds. The robber gang theory is incredibly compelling for all of the reasons that Todd McComas says. And Todd McComas is very clever. He's a former detective himself who worked on the case. It is impossible to rule it out definitively. In my view, there are some, Todd and I have a difference of opinion on some things that relate to that particular theory, but it may be. We've been surprised so often.
I bet.
I just think the biggest things that you can't go past is the getaway car and how it escalated from a group that never hurt anybody except for an accident. There was an accidental firing in a convenience store where someone was shot in the stomach, but it never had escalated. Obviously, the MO was very similar. They'd go in the back door at closing time or someone was taking out the trash. They'd take the takings and that was it. So there was those things that are very compelling. But I just think the two biggest issues are why would they park the getaway car and how would it escalate to a quadruple homicide when they'd never hurt anybody before?
So let's discuss the initial investigation just for one more second. You have 4 theories. In your view, if the initial investigation had been handled properly, how much closer would we be or have been to settling on one of the theories or maybe coming up with a different one? In other words, did the initial investigation, was it handled so terribly that it makes it difficult, if not impossible, to come up with a single theory that explains it all?
It's a really tricky one to answer because we don't know what they would have turned up. The thing that sticks in my mind is that people at the scene weren't interviewed at the time. And that is, I think, the biggest hurdle to overcome because it's very tricky to go back. There was a general sort of, in that area, distrust of police. Had they been there on the scene at the time and done what should have been done, which is interview everyone who was there, who knows what they would have turned up. At the moment, he passed, I think, in 2023, but Alan Pruitt is the sole eyewitness in this case. And the Dunkin' Donuts next door was open. There were people there. Somebody should have seen something, but we'll never know.
Fingerprints would seem to have been
Fingerprints is the other one, yeah.
Especially if
the physical evidence that's astronomical because there would have been so much physical evidence in that restaurant. Nothing was collected. It was all reset.
And given the fact that the robber gang theory is almost self-defined as a bunch of hoods who have probably been through the system, so you would have had the fingerprints and you'd have been able to interview more people who were associates. Let's go on to theory number 2, and that is the Forrester conundrum. Don Forrester. Who is he and why is he important?
Don Forrester was doing 95 years in jail for a really horrific rape. He confessed 3 times, I believe. He confessed, recanted, confessed again, and then recanted again, ultimately, I think. His story is, again, incredibly compelling. He's connected to some of the people who orbit this case, some of the bad actors who orbit this case. Unfortunately, there are so many wild inconsistencies in his story. I think when push came to shove and they took it to the prosecutor, wasn't willing to move forward. I think probably made the decision a little bit easier that he was never going to see the light of day again anyway. But that's cold comfort for the families.
Initially, when you start out presenting this theory, you're really brought it, you're sucked into it. Man, this dude knows. But it seems almost like he's recounting what he was told or read. Then when challenged, he starts to fold. Is that a fair statement, Luke?
I think the story is that he was brought into the war room, so to speak, and saw a lot of the evidence, what the police had in terms of their investigation, and was fed a lot of it by the time he got in there. I think every jurisdiction wanted their moment. They wanted to have to solve it if he fit. And at the time, he seemed to know more than anybody else. Yeah, it's in the film.
He knew the position of the bodies in Johnson County in the woods.
Yeah, he did. He got some of it wrong. He said he stabbed Jayne in the leg, I think, which wasn't true. And then he said some of his information wasn't exactly correct, but I think it was probably enough for them at the time that it was compelling.
Let me ask another question. I wrote this down I want to make sure I get this in. Jayne Freet was stabbed twice, multiple times?
No, just once. She was stabbed in the heart. The knife handle broke off and the blade was actually lodged in her chest when they found her.
And Daniel Davis was shot, and Ruth Ellen Shelton was shot. But here's my question. Mark Flemons appeared to have been beaten to death. Is there any sense that this was, and maybe this is a very American question, that was any sort of racial animus in beating the black kid while the others were dispatched more quickly?
It depends who you ask, because some of the theories is that he actually got away and ran into a tree and fell back and choked on his own blood. So the bodies were found in a way where the two, Danny and Ruth, were together, very close. Jayne a bit of a distance away. The theory that we have gone through with people is that Jayne, someone came up behind her and put their arm over her right shoulder and stabbed her over the shoulder and into the chest, and she fell forward and snapped the blade. And then Mark, because he was quick, he was an athletic guy, he got away and potentially hit a branch, or someone caught him.
Because in the documentary, The Speedway Murders, the 40-year-old secret, the person who retells that says that he didn't fall into a tree, he fell into a Louisville slugger. Is that plausible?
The autopsy is the wounds to his face indicative of one blow across the bridge of his nose. We've heard lots of things. Todd McComas says in the documentary, the way he was positioned, it looked as though he had hit a tree and fallen where he stood. There weren't, I don't believe, any fragments of bark or anything like that.
Yeah, that's true. And he wasn't near a tree.
Autopsy.
He wasn't near a tree. Plus, the other thing I thought to myself as I was watching that part was, these guys, they didn't jack around. They were killing these kids. And so just a guy lying on his back, bleeding, you don't know whether he's dead or alive. So why not make sure that you have finished the job, for lack of a better term?
It's a bit of a mystery as well for us as well. It's like with where the Vega was found as well. And I think because again, in Todd's podcast, like there was no fragments of anything found in the area where he had the blow, like the main around his eyes. There was no wood fragments, nothing from a bat. So that was a pretty curious thing as well. What we know is that
nothing from a tree.
Yeah. But also what we know is that it was a pretty frenzied attack. It wasn't particularly clean. It wasn't like a professional mob hit or whatever that. It was whoever did it, they acted out of haste. And that, again, according to Todd, probably had never done anything like that before. And they know that from the gun was fully unloaded. All of the bullets were fired in a pretty frenzied way. So it just suggests that whatever happened out there wasn't planned.
Did you ever attempt, even in your own mind, to answer the question, why did the 4 Burger Chef employees go with them?
We've asked
the robbers?
Yeah. We always asked ourselves, like, why would you leave that building? Like, why would you get into that vehicle, whatever it was, a van? Yeah.
The van.
The obvious answer is, oh, sorry.
I was going to say the van with 15 different colors. And that's an inside joke you'll know when you watch the documentary. But you said the Dunkin' Donuts is open. There are eyewitnesses. You get the sense they were threatened inside the Burger Chef with the gun or the knife. And they just said, look, if you cooperate, you live. If you yell and scream, you won't. It's one of those things where you watch, like you're watching a movie and like Silence of the Lambs, and the woman gets in the van to help Buffalo, and you're like going, what in the hell are you doing? Why are you getting in the car? Anyway, go ahead.
Again, like that's why we think, I don't know, but it's suspected that potentially they knew one of them knew them and maybe thought that they were in control. They thought they knew what they were doing and willingly went with them.
Because they believed they wouldn't be harmed?
It depends which theory you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
If it was the robber gang theory, they were told that put your jackets on and that they were going to be taken and then released. Mm-hmm. But if you look at some of the other theories that involve potentially drug debts, that they went with them because they thought that they could get out of it by going with them.
Let's talk about the drug debt before we move on to
Robert, I just wanted to clarify one thing. I think I said before that Jayne was stabbed once. I think I said before that Jayne was stabbed once. In fact, I think she was stabbed twice.
Yeah, I think that as well. I thought that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what comes through in the other investigative stories that I read. Yeah. A big part, not a majority part, but a significant segment of your story is drugs, which were, as we said before we started, it was the 70s and it was lucrative. And there's a theory, actually more than that, an assertion that Jayne Freit's brother was heavily involved in the drug trade. And the genesis of this crime, maybe the initial crime and not the eventual murder, was related to Jayne's brother and his own criminal history, Jimmy Freit. Do you find that compelling?
Look, you go, Luke. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it's compelling when it comes down to how Alan Pruitt was originally found and brought forward, because he was in an argument with Jimmy in prison, supposedly over details of the crime. Of course, it's compelling when you realize, or when you hear about anecdotally what he was doing.
But there's no assertion, as I recall, that Jimmy Freit was directly involved in the murder of his own sister.
Again, it depends on who you ask. We've heard it all. We've heard everything from that. He was there, but
I think it's reasonable to say there's not a lot of strong evidence to support that.
Yeah. But one of Alan Pruitt's confessions, because his confessions changed over the years, was that Jimmy was there. Wasn't it, Adam? That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
It gets wild. Well, there's one, yeah.
Yeah, I think with Jimmy Freed, again, it's that want to explain why something so senseless happens. And if you believe, there's all sorts of wild theories that people were dealing drugs out of the drive-through at the Burger Chef. I haven't seen any evidence to support that.
The ceiling in the restroom.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Ginger talks about it in the film, and we've heard that from several people. Again, it's important to say, I haven't seen any evidence to support that. I haven't seen a lot of evidence to support that Jayne, Mark, Ruth, or Danny were big-time drug dealers. And so the question, again, is if it's not a robbery gone bad, if it is drug-related in some way, then how? And it's very easy to make the leap then to Jimmy, given his connections to the Sons of Silence, which were a biker gang. He was arrested on cocaine charges. And Forrester in his confession talks about owing money for cocaine.
And I would imagine that it's hard to dismiss out of hand any theory that begins with drugs plus money plus the 1970s.
It's mentioned in the report as well, the FBI report that was released last year, about that there was a number of employees that were dealing out of there.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to theory number 3, and that is the Speedway bomber. Brett Kimberlin was probably the most notorious Indiana criminal in the early 1980s. What the crimes were, again, random, no sense of connection necessary to anything. This is what, at the time, you bring this into your documentary, and I had no clue, none, zero, that there was any connection. How did your research, your work, lead you to posit a theory that involved Brett Kimberlin?
I think initially what led us to it was on our first trips to India, we would vox pop people, and we would speak to anyone who was willing to talk to us about their memories of what happened and their thoughts on who might have done it. Brett Kimberlin's name came up over and over again. A lot of that is due to the Speedway bombings of which he was convicted. People make that connection. They happened so close together. I think mostly that's why people draw that conclusion. Kimberlin was also implicated in the murder of his then partner's grandmother. And no, wait, was it her mother or her grandmother?
It was mother.
Yeah, her mother, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Julie. And I think people just thought, if he's going around doing this, and I should say that he strenuously denies having anything to do with the murder of Julia Cyphers and the Speedway bombings.
He's alive. Oh, none of us knew he was alive. I couldn't believe it. When I saw him and his damn animals and reptiles and everything else that he shows off in the documentary, he's such a forgotten figure. I think the last time, I can't even remember the last time he was news. How did you secure an interview with him? What a coup.
We worked closely with another journalist who had a relationship with him, and we were able to tee it up that way.
Do you think he just wanted a chance to look in the camera and say, none of this it's ludicrous, forgive me for being an editorialist, but that I didn't do any of this stuff, that he's basically...
Look, he's fighting. He was at the time fighting in the courts to try to have his conviction and bombings overturned. Again, he says he's had nothing to do with any of it.
But committing a crime to cover up another crime is at the heart of the murders. So it's completely within human nature to say, I'm going to commit crime B so that they don't catch me committing crime A.
Good money after bad, yeah, for sure. And I that is what gets posited a lot, that Kimberlin committed. Some people say that Kimberlin committed the Burger Chef murders to cover his tracks in the bombings were perpetrated to throw police off the scent after the murder of Julia Cyphers, and the Speedway bombing and the Speedway murders down the line from that. Sorry?
To reset the chronology again, the Speedway bombings happened between September 1st and September 6th, 1978, and the Burger Chef murders committed on November 17th, 1978. Did Brett Kimberlin, because I didn't, if I forget this from the documentary, please forgive me. Did he, since he was obviously so wrapped up in the drug trade, the Speedway is making all this money. He clearly has an underground network, a criminal enterprise. He says it's not him, but you would think that he would be a fount of information about who it could be. Did he indicate to either of you who he thought or which theory he thought fit most perfectly into the solving of the murders?
He talked about his own, like, how he wasn't involved, and that's pretty much it. He didn't run through. He didn't run.
No, is the short answer. Yeah.
So did he know Jimmy? Did he know Jimmy Free? Did he know Jeffrey? Did he know Alan Pruitt? Did he know any of these folks, Forrester, who came forward or suspected?
As far as we know, he didn't. And I think we did ask him about certain
names. We did put all those names to him. He claims not to know any of them. Some of them claim to know him, but I think he's a figure that looms so large. I think in retrospect, everybody knows him. We didn't come across anyone who said that they had direct dealings with Kimberlin. But again, we got a lot of anecdotal, a lot of people that spoke about Kimberlin and his kind of dealings, for want of a better word.
And it was 45 years ago. So, yeah, your point's well taken. The eyewitness account is the fourth theory, and that centers on a fellow named Alan Pruitt. How did you discover Alan Pruitt, and why does he loom so large? Because as the police, or maybe I've just answered my own question, as the police say in the documentary, The Speedway Murders, it is incontrovertibly true that Alan Pruitt was there as an eyewitness.
Yeah, they can definitely substantiate that he was there because there was other eyewitnesses that put him there as well, as Kramer says in the film.
What does Mr. Pruitt add that other actors don't?
He names two people that he saw loading the kids in the van. His first confession was the one that I think was primarily used. Adam will, that was the one that got Callums and Tomasek found. Was that right, Adam? That they were found?
Yeah, it's a little bit convoluted, but because when Marianne Higginbotham washed up in a barrel in White Lick Creek in 1979 and had been missing since sort of July of 1978, which is obviously several months before the Burger Chef murders, when her body was found, there was a woman who came forward and said, my partner killed Marianne and her boyfriend, Tim Willoughby, from memory, I think it was June of 19, but then Alan Pruitt, and Tim Willoughby's body's never been found, it should be said. Alan Pruitt says he saw Tim Willoughby at the Burger Chef on the night that the co-workers were taken. And ultimately, we think that it's that information from Pruitt that leads to the charges against two men who, based on the testimony of this woman, were charged with the murder of Tim Willoughby and Marianne. Those charges were ultimately dropped, we think, in part because Pruitt put Tim Willoughby at the Burger Chef. Sorry, it's very complicated.
No, I shouldn't have launched into
that. But you guys do a terrific job in the documentary of spinning all this, and because you can get, and that's why I thought it was terrific how you compartmentalized it into basically four segments. I think it's Mark Clemens switched shifts. He shouldn't have been there that night.
Yeah.
And Danny Davis had just started and he calls his mother to say, hey, can I stay late? So there's this bad luck, and you do this beautiful job of where he calls his mother, and it's the prelude or the intro into each sort of theory. And you just are like, go home, kid, just go home. Who is?
Yeah, there's a lot of sliding doors moments.
Yes, exactly right. Who is Jeff Reed, and why did you decide in the documentary to explore his role or accused role or proposed role in the murders last? Because to me, like the excellent filmmakers you obviously are, you take us down multiple paths, and then eventually we converge on Jeff Reed.
Yeah. We don't want to give away too much. What in the film is the culmination of our research. That's the direction that it took us in. We were able to speak to someone who had never spoken before, who has a really interesting yarn to spin, and it relates to Jeff Reed. He's not the he was looked at the time. Kramer tells a really compelling story about picking him up from a halfway house and accusing him of murder. Yeah, I think the answer to the question is simply that's where the investigation took us. That's where the evidence took us.
Luke?
Yeah, I echo that as well. And we're presenting what we learnt along the way. And he's a figure that at that time as well loomed large, with the snake pit and his nickname being the king of the snake pit. Is that right?
Which
the mayor of the snake pit, I think.
Mayor of the snake pit. I'm sorry.
Which I thought was my brother's nickname, considering how much time he spent in the snake pit in the 70s.
Yeah, which, and you see it in the film and seeing the kind of character he was, and just a terrifying prospect of having that person show up at night looking for looking for you.
Strong, big, menacing. But I want to make sure that we say this too, because you're careful not to accuse anyone. And the police, the law enforcement officials, you could tell, are like very reluctant to get too righteous on one particular person. Was that a conscious decision, editorial decision? Look, we're not going to, when you're done watching this, you're not going to hear us say these 4 kids were killed by X.
Yeah, look, I think we have our cake and eat it as well. I think the audience will leave understanding what our educated guess is, but ultimately we want this to generate water cooler discussion. We want people to watch the film and kind of make up their own minds. We were quite careful not to say definitively, here it is, this is the answer.
Yeah, I think to add to Adam's, what we wanted is for the kids themselves to act as like us and argue the toss with each other and have all the different theories and give it to them to ultimately decide as well.
Oh, it's a brilliant technique. And this podcast isn't going to be posted until the Monday after the debut on the streaming channel. So we're not giving anything away, but I thought the technique that you employed was terrific. We have just a few more minutes. Go ahead.
Yeah, we spoke to Teresa, who's Ruth Shelton's sister, watched the film for the first time today, before the screening on Friday. And it was a very emotional experience for her. Obviously, it's her sister. She's seeing someone playing her sister for the first time ever. And she loved having them kind of act as avatars for, it could be the investigators, it could be Adam and I, it could be arguing the toss and who they thought did it and stuff. And she could really see like Kramer or the other investigators sitting there arguing, and saw the kids doing that. And she loved that.
Oh, it brings you in I'm not a true crime junkie per se. Most of the documentaries I watch are about stuff that happened 700 years ago, right? That's just what I find fascinating. But having watched I've watched your documentary, The Speedway Murders, there was no way I could turn it off. And we have just a few more minutes to discuss this terrific effort. You met relatives and friends of the victims of the employees who were killed that night. What was their reaction to you telling this story? And obviously Teresa she's featured most, and she's very heartbreaking in a lot of terms, but seeing the mother of Danny Davis is tremendously impactful. How did they act? How did they receive your efforts?
Mostly people haven't seen the film yet. We're coming over with our film under our arm to show it to everybody in Indy on Friday. What I can say is that Luke's spoken about Teresa, who was just extraordinary and so generous with her time. Yeah, Norma was incredibly courageous. I think you can see in her face how hard it is for her and how fresh it still is. People handle their grief in different ways. Teresa is at the forefront of this. She's advocating a lot, whereas Norma doesn't do a lot of that because it's just too painful for her. She's chosen to try to get on with her life, though Danny's always in her mind. So for her to do this for us, for her to trust us with this story was just incredible. And yeah, we often say that we hope people like it. We hope there are some good reviews. I'm sure there'll be some good, some bad, but really the only opinions that matter to us, sort of Teresa and Norma.
Because she has to, and she immediately, so I'm not bringing this up to be maudlin, she immediately has to confront the fact that it was her decision as a mother to allow her son to stay late that caused him to still be there.
Yeah. And she very casually says, and you blame yourself for that. It's hard. It's just hard to imagine how you go on with that kind of pain. But she's just the force of nature, Norma.
I want to ask a couple of questions about the production and then leave you be. But how did Burger Chef react to the murders? How did Speedway react to them? Nothing, we're in public relations in one way or another, but nothing is as damaging to your brand as murder and crime. And do you give high marks, say, for Burger Chef and how they reacted to it and help the investigation?
They donated money, I know that, to the investigation. I think they were fairly helpful. They were pretty transparent. I know we saw a letter that they wrote to Ruth's parents afterwards, which was pretty fascinating to see.
But the restaurant reopened the next morning.
But I don't know if is that their fault or the police? It's a hard one.
Mm-hmm. Adam?
Yeah, I think there was security, there was training, there was all sorts of things that happened in the aftermath.
Did they have a bunch of employees quit? How did they recruit
people? Yeah, there was there was a huge drop off. We know a lot of people that I don't think Ginger didn't work there after that. She wasn't allowed to.
There are a lot of people whose parents said, no, thank you.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to mention 4 other names, and I'm going to mispronounce their names, so please forgive me and correct me, because their performance is, I'm going to say perfect, but it's damn near close. And that's Essie Randalls, plays Jayne. Naya Kofi, who plays Mark. Davida McKenzie plays Ruth. And Joe Cumston, who plays Danny. These 4 actors are all Australian?
Correct.
And
Davita's from New Zealand. Yeah.
And you actually got their names right. You did pretty well.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah. Davita's from where?
New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Yeah.
These kids sound like they went to Speedway High School.
That's very nice to hear.
We did
I
have
had no
those.
idea. I
We
had no
had
idea
some-
until I looked it up. I know you had to consult a linguist to be helpful and all
Yeah.
that stuff, but I had no idea that they weren't American. And then I'm starting to think, if this was made in Australia, they wouldn't have imported kids from America. And then I read more about your documentary and I saw it. Another question about, very quickly, the Burger Chef, I'm going to say set. It is astonishingly accurate, which I know is your job. You want to be as accurate as possible. But this is on a whole nother level. The menu, the lighted menu behind the counter, the pieces of paper that are used to wrap the sandwiches, the uniforms, the color scheme. Please just take a couple of minutes, because when you watch this documentary and you're old enough, and I'm 56, you're old enough to have gone to a Burger Chef, it will push you back, set you back on your heels, how accurate it is. How difficult was it in Australia to come up and create a Burger Chef set with all of these unbelievable and unreal accurate accoutrement, for lack of a better term, and the cars? You have all these American cars. How important was it? I know it's very important, but how much work did you put into being, we want the viewer to feel like they were in an actual Burger Chef in November of 1978?
Yeah, it was. We spent an incredible amount of time research. There was about a year leading up to it that we were buying paraphernalia off eBay, acquiring everything that we could, learning, buying floor plans. We got the actual uniforms from a deceased estate. And then also we went to car shows for about a year before. I think, yeah.
You found a Vega.
Yeah, we did. We found a Vega. We bought a Vega that didn't arrive in time. And then we found one in country Victoria that was the exact same one, and got it. Yeah, the only one in Australia.
Adam?
Yeah, the authenticity was really important to us. We, as you say, we wanted to transport people back to the west side of Indianapolis in 1978. Our production design team were just extraordinary, and the brief from the get-go was we wanted to recreate every inch of it as faithfully as we possibly could. And the results speak for themselves, I think.
Did you research?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say,
go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, you could transport it and put it there, and you would not, in 1970, you would not know the difference. Like, people were coming into the restaurant off the street. No, they thought it was a real restaurant. It was
I read that. That's great.
Yeah.
Did
like,
you get
people were.
Did you get the prices? Did you look up? Because I'm looking at the prices for the Big Chef and all that sort of thing.
The prices were right. It was all like the attention to detail. There was trays under the counter. Jayne's office, you walked in there and there was like writing pads that had Burger Chef logos on it, receipt books. It was, I've never seen anything like it. And it was built out of an abandoned Chinese restaurant that was about to get knocked down. And we found there was two buildings. So there was one that could be the Dunkin' Donut and one that could be the Burger Chef, which matched almost, if you look down on it from Google Maps, the actual layout and floor plan was pretty much exactly the same as the one on Crawfordsville Road in Speedway.
And did you get a chance to visit the building here in Speedway before? I know it became like a cash pawn place or whatever before it got knocked down.
Yeah, we went a few times. We actually got in and we got all around it and filmed quite a lot of it.
Eerie?
It's eerie when you know what happened. Yeah, it is, especially when you go behind it. Because I think when you're there and you've got the main road, right, Crawfordsville Road, and it's quite set back. And so if you go behind it, you can really see how dark it would have been and not very well lit. No CCTV, obviously. It's got that and you can see where the actual menu board would have been, where people would have ordered, because it's still bolts. There's still bolts in the ground. It's definitely got that very eerie predestination. I don't know what the right word is, feel to it. And again, we were lucky to go there a few times.
And you visited Johnson County's site, but I believe there's houses or development in that area now.
We did. Yeah, we went with Jim Kramer, who pointed out exactly where the bodies were found and everything. So it is quite close to a property now.
Yeah, there's lots of properties there. Back then it was rural. There was a house nearby and someone reported hearing shots, I think around 1:30 a.m., but mostly it was just scrub.
Jayne Freet, Mark Flemons, Ruth Shelton, and Daniel Davis. They are remembered in Speedway with a very pretty monument. And they are enshrined, for better or worse, in our memories through this brilliant documentary, The Speedway Murders. Let me very quickly say thank you to Caitlin Rose, who helped put this podcast together, and also producer of your documentary, Anna Vincent, who I reached out to, I don't know, it might have been a year ago. As soon as I saw that this was a thing, I reached out to Anna immediately, and she has been wonderful in making sure this interview happened. We've spent the last hour or so discussing the new documentary. Compelling is the word we've been using, and it's not strong enough, called The Speedway Murders. And it is available on Apple TV, on Prime Video, and on demand. By the time this podcast is posted, you will be able to watch it. Luke and Adam, thank you so very much for your time. It's 9:30 here in Indianapolis, which means it's 10:30 p.m. in Australia.
11:30.
11:30. So please forgive me for taking so much of your time and keeping you up. It's a remarkable, respectful achievement.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really fun talking about it.
Thank you very much for listening to Leaders and Legends, brought to you by Veteran Strategies Incorporated. If you want to contact us about this program or our menu of public relations services, please send us an email at robert@veteranstrategies.com. That's robert@veteranstrategies.com.